Societal Collapse, the road to self-reliance. Try to imagine what self-reliance really means during a major catastrophe like societal collapse. The worst case scenario has you providing everything for yourself. Start preparing for collapse by getting survival food, water, and shelter in order, and then honing your survival skills. Focus on doing things without electricity or running water. Plan as if all civilized services end tomorrow. If we do have some kind of societal collapse, something that stems from what I think is the most likely scenario, financial collapse, collapse of our currency, which will more than likely lead to other things. Well, let me back up a bit. The road to self-reliance is basically a sky-high view, an overview. It's like an outline. I have a lot of other videos on food storage and water storage and different kinds of food and long-term food storage and stuff like that on ReadyScroll.com. This is just a general overview, and this is kind of a part of a series of articles that I've written this month that are me trying to think through the process. Sometimes these ideas may seem somewhat disconnected, and the reason for that is because the idea of collapsology or societal collapse is very broad. It's very interconnected. Societies collapse for different reasons, and so it's not exactly straightforward. Okay, that said, let's get on to it. 5 reasons why societies collapse: political, economic, social factors, relations with neighboring societies, human impact on the environment, drastic climate change, and relations with hostile societies. There's three generalities regarding societal collapse. This first one, I think we're seeing this right now. Elites versus society. Conflict of interest between the elites and the society as a whole. Elites have the ability to isolate themselves while doing things that are good for them in the short term, but bad for society in the long term. Yeah, throughout history, this has been done all the way back to pre-biblical times. Elites, there have been a certain group of elites that have always done this kind of stuff. What I think is different now is they don't even try to hide it anymore, which is somewhat concerning. So another generality is an inability or unwillingness to adapt. Sometimes I have a hard time getting my mind around this. I'm the kind of person that likes constant change. I like to be challenged. I don't want to say that I like it when things go wrong, but I tend to do my best in adverse situations. But I think the average person has, and this is a reflection of the society as a whole, has an inability or unwillingness of society to change or adapt to new situations. And the main challenge to that is that it's difficult to change the habits that trouble society when they give society short-term strength. So short-term thinking, basically. And we have that in spades here in the United States. Number 3, there's 13 social issues that can lead to collapse. These are not black and white bullet points. These are all things that are interrelated. They affect one another, and they can come together to bring down a society. So overpopulation, deforestation, chemical contamination, water contamination and drought, social contamination, loss of topsoil, climate change, non-adaptive agricultural practices, toxics, ethnic tensions, economic instability, scapegoating, lack of identity, or destruction of self-esteem. If you're part of a group, a philosophy, people that are like-minded, you have more of a sense of identity. When you go into a situation that's kind of free fall, where you don't really identify with everything, where the things that in the past have bolstered society are under attack, it's at times some people feel like they have to go underground to follow certain ideas, whether it be the Christian religion or academic ideas or whatever that may be. So basically, I think that a lack of identity, the destruction of self-esteem can come from when you no longer have the ability to voice your opinion, when you no longer have free speech. Lack of a belief system. Okay, so I got ahead of myself there, but those two things are interconnected. Lack of a belief system. I don't care what you believe. I don't judge you for it, but you have to believe in something. You have to have a philosophy of life to guide you morally, signposts. It doesn't have to be a judgmental thing. Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, the Stoics, the ancient philosophers, enlightened thinking. It doesn't really matter, a combination of all those things, whatever it is that gives you a belief system. And then the final one is instability and chaos. And this is an inroad for all kinds of nasty things. If a country like the United States, 50 states, 51 states, is cohesive, even if we have issues and we argue and we have differences of opinion, East Coast, West Coast, Texas, Florida, wherever you're from, whether you're conservative, a constitutionalist, a libertarian, have more of a socialist bent, as long as objective speech and channels of communication are open, then we're good to go. Once those start to shut down and you start scapegoating based on what your beliefs are, and, well, I'm going to leave it at that. You know what I'm talking about. So instability and chaos, a majority of every society throughout history wants anything but instability and chaos. Most people actually want to be led. They want to be told what to do. They don't, and I don't mean this to sound arrogant because I don't mean it this way, but it is just a fact. Most people don't really want to have to think much about what's going on around them. They just want to know that if they do A, B, C, D, all the way to Z, that they're going to have a specific outcome. Well, that is not how you protect, and that is not how you conserve things like republics and democracies. And our forefathers were smart. I know they had drawbacks. I know there were some social issues, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. They had some good ideas, and that's why we live in the country that we live in. Okay, Jared Mason Diamond, Pulitzer Prize-winning American geographer and historian, has written some pretty good books. I don't like all of his angles. See, he has a strong leaning on environmentalism. I love the earth. I love the ocean. I scuba dive. I sail. I love the beach. I like to hike. I've hiked on the Appalachian Trail. I love nature. But anytime you have an idea that can be a hot button issue, that can be misused to manipulate. So you can say you're going to do all this stuff. You can build wealth through X, Y, and Z propositions. But in reality, it's just another way for politicians and the prime movers to make money and to gain control. They have no, what's the word I'm looking for? They do not intend to fix anything. They intend to make money and to have as much power as they possibly can. It's taken me a long time to realize this. I know that's somewhat naive, but it's all around us. We can see it. All right, what is self-reliance during a societal collapse? Self-reliance during societal collapse depends on personal abilities like critical thinking to prepare and plan for sustainable emergency, food, water, and shelter in the event of major conflagration such as societal collapse or long-term national emergency. The necessities of life, food, water, and shelter should be set up to run without outside supplies or assistance when possible. So I know that's a little bit pie in the sky. Is it achievable in modern times? Possibly not, but you should strive to be as independent as you possibly can. I know it's easier said than done. Do the best you can to prepare for survival with the resources you have. Random thoughts on the road to collapse. Suppose you have the ability to move to a rural area that has a temperate climate, fresh water, low population, and decent soil. I suggest you do it if you have the means. If you're interested in this subject, you might also like the Ready Squirrel article, 26 Ways to Prepare for Societal Collapse. And I'll have that link down below in the comments. Self-reliance, water and food storage. To be self-reliant during a major emergency event, the first thing you need to get in order is potable water storage or a water source. Well, river, lake, stream, rainwater catchment, purchase water, however you got to do it. And the second goal is to stockpile food. Henry Kissinger once said, and there's more to the quote than this, but if you control the food, you control the people. So keep that in mind. You won't function if you don't have water to drink and food to eat. I guess I'm stating the obvious there. Getting these supplies set up depends on building skills and materials. You can go pretty basic, but you have to learn how to get and keep drinking water clean and acquire and preserve food. So you can stockpile hundreds of thousands of calories, hundreds to thousands of pounds of food easily, staple foods that have supported societies, cultures for thousands of years. Wheat, for instance, that's one of the top 3 staples along with dried beans and white rice. Wheat has been cultivated for 12,000 years. The Bible was written, just under 4,000 years ago. So think about that. The Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks. I'm not so sure about the Greeks. For sure, the Egyptians and the Romans depended heavily on wheat. Rice, the ancient civilizations of China. Other forms of wheat in the Middle East, couscous, used to make falafel, the beans used to make hummus that have a 30-year shelf life. So you can inexpensively, relatively inexpensively store a buttload of food. If you use oxygen-free storage, you can use food-grade buckets in conjunction with 18 by 28 Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers, and all of the main dry staples that I store, again, rice, beans, and wheat, they have a 30-plus year shelf life. Mylar is a true oxygen barrier. It's a true light barrier if it's 5 mil plus. It's also a moisture barrier, all the things that kill your food. So if you stock these foods like that with that perfect trifecta of the bucket, the Mylar bag, and the oxygen absorber, for most of the hard grains and beans, you're looking at a 30-plus year shelf life. So in my case, I'll be dead. I'll be dead in 30 years. So I'm okay with leaving some buckets of food behind. Okay, so getting these supplies set up depends on building skills and materials. You can go pretty basic, and what I meant by basic is what I was talking about before with the bucket foods. But you have to learn how to get and keep drinking water clean and acquire and preserve food. Okay, so to learn more about societal collapse, check out the Ready Squirrel article, What Happens When Society Collapses. Water supply. The only thing more important for self-reliance than water, the only thing more important than water is air. So, you will not survive more than 3 days without water, and you need a lot of it. The average American household uses 82 gallons of water per person per day. The average person living off-grid uses 50 gallons per day. So that 1 gallon per day per person suggested by FEMA, that's great for a short-term emergency, hurricane, earthquake, forest fire, tornado. Not going to get you down the road if we're talking long-term survival. Water needs to be stored, treated, and moved around. Prepping water requires both materials and skills. Before SHTF, it's not that complicated, but you'll want to do it before things head south. I've had a lot of coffee today. If you don't have food stores, try storing dry staples now. Store foods like dry white rice, dry beans, wheat, rolled oats to get started. These foods create a bedrock of food you can build on, and they have a shelf life of 30 plus years in oxygen-free storage. Once you have dry bulk calories in place, start fine-tuning for nutrition and palate fatigue with canned foods and specialty foods like freeze-dried meals, MREs, etc. This can be a little overwhelming when you start, but you can keep it pretty simple. Just take a look at the Ready Squirrel article, How Much Food to Stockpile Per Person. And I'll link that in the comments below in the video. It's a comprehensive article on things to consider when planning a long-term food storage, and includes calorie requirements and examples of a year's supply of food for one person. If you store no other food, you can survive long-term on dry beans and rice, and they are relatively inexpensive. So if you're thinking, that you're going to be gardening and foraging and supplementing your food from the wild, it just really depends on where you live. There's certain areas of the country where there's a ton of natural resources. Like if you live in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, for instance, deer everywhere. I think there's like 1 million accidents a year caused by deer, running in front of a car. So even if you're going to do that, even if you're going to have a huge garden, you're going to can, you're going to forage, you're going to hunt, the dry staples are that concrete cornerstone food that makes sure that you won't starve. because if anybody that's done any hunting or fishing knows that, like you can go a long time without getting fish. You can go a long time without getting game. It just depends on the type of, the time of year it is, what the season is, etc. So I suggest you store foods less than 10% in moisture using Mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, and a lidded 5-gallon bucket. This trifecta of storage containers and oxygen removal kills bugs and keeps dry foods for 30 years. Mylar food-grade buckets and oxygen absorbers are a simple way of quickly storing thousands of calories. So it's a reiteration of what I already said, but I think it's important. I think people overcomplicate survival food. Yeah, you want to, once you get down the road, once you have everything kind of the base established, you want to refine things and work on like palate fatigue. You want to round out your nutrition with canned foods. You want to have some freeze-dried foods for your bug-out kit, stuff like that. But the base of your foods, all you need is staples and water. Okay, learn how to store dry goods by watching the following video, how to store wheat. The storage method shown is the same for all dry goods. How to store wheat, you're on YouTube. This video is on the channel. Yeah, this video, excuse me, is about how to store wheat, but it's the same exact process, the same exact way that you store all dry staples less than 10% in moisture, low in fat, with one exception. More dense foods like wheat, like white rice, they require less oxygen absorption than, say, beans that have more airspace in between them. You need more oxygen absorption for that. Depending on where you live, some dry foods can be challenging to find locally. In my case, I had to order hard white wheat berries online, which meant paying for the shipping at an additional cost. I purchased most of my beans and rice at Sam's Club, but you can find beans at Walmart, Costco, wholesale, and at the regular grocery store. I've got another article here you can check out. Food for the collapse, top 4 to stockpile. Survival shelter, prepping for collapse. It goes without saying that we can't all build a survival shelter out in the woods, but that is the goal. Do the best with what you have, but try to get away from heavily populated areas if at all possible. Survival shelters for societal collapse should be away from heavy population and provide food, potable water, security, and shelter from the worst weather in that location. Ideally, the shelter will have copious natural resources such as fresh water and trees for fuel and construction. And I have another article on ReadySquirrel.com that talks about bug out locations for the collapse. That's all it talks about. It's a pretty comprehensive article. You can check that out. Survival gardening and animal husbandry. It's tough. It's tough nut to swallow, but I don't see any other way to survive a societal collapse long term other than learning and practicing small-scale farming or gardening and raising livestock. Gardening, raising livestock, and food preservation are crucial skills to master for surviving long-term societal collapse or emergency. One of the best ways to get solid renewable protein and fat sources into a post-apocalyptic diet is to raise chickens and rabbits. Chicken eggs provide fat, which is difficult to come by during societal collapse, and rabbits are a ready source of protein that multiply quickly. Food preservation and canning. Canning, I'm very weak at this. I really need to get better at food preservation. Fermenting, I really like pickled stuff, pickled peppers, pickled cucumbers. I've made hard cider. I've made honey mead. I've made beer. All of those are great skills to have, but food preservation is really important. So let's say that you have a 1-acre survival emergency garden. If you garden, you know that certain vegetables are going to come in season all at once. So you could have hundreds of pounds of whatever vegetable. Well, you have to have a way to conserve those. And that the same goes for if you're going to slaughter an animal like a pig to eat. You have to be able to conserve that meat so that you can eat it over a long period of time. To prepare for societal collapse, it is necessary to have the skills and equipment necessary to preserve garden produce and meat for a lengthened period of time. Canning, smoking, salting, and the use of root cellars are necessary skills for food supplies and surviving long term. Self-reliance, critical thinking skills for societal collapse. Critical thinking is paramount to self-reliance during a societal collapse. When a population is hungry, scared, or living under conditions of duress, they are more easily manipulated. Think about other societies that did what they were told to feel safe. So if put that another way, what does Ben Franklin say? If you are willing to trade freedom for safety, you deserve neither. If you were, is that how it goes? Yeah. So if you're willing to give up your rights that have been hard won over the history of this country, and they have improved, and I know there's all kinds of arguments about the Constitution and what our forefathers did, but guess what? Things have constantly improved because the rules were put in place initially, and the ideas of the Enlightenment were put in place so that we could improve over time. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to how things have been running. Anyway, I got off on a sidetrack there. Sorry. I probably shouldn't be drinking this cup of coffee because it gets me. I'm all like, I'm wired. Okay, so critical thinking is paramount to self-reliance during a societal collapse. When a population is hungry, scared, or living under conditions of duress, they're more easily manipulated. Think about other societies that did what they were told to feel safe. Other societies that did what they were told to feel safe. Not the best choice. Critical thinking skills will serve you well pre- and post-collapse. Independent thought versus group think. The exact definition of critical thinking is controversial because it is complicated. In a nutshell, critical thinking is what you do before making a sound judgment or taking action. It doesn't mean that you're always going to be right. It means that you're actually looking at the evidence, weighing the facts, and then making a decision based on your objective observations and your skill set. So following is a high caliber definition of critical thinking. And it's very strange. This is going to seem like this definition was bent to match my narrative. We all have a narrative. I have a narrative. I think you know what it is. This comes from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and it's their definition of critical thinking from July 21st, 2018. The competing definitions of critical thinking can be understood as differing conceptions of the same basic concept. Careful, unemotional, thinking directed to a goal. Its adoption, critical thinking, is based on a respect for autonomy, so personal rights, personal freedoms, the rights of man, and preparing for success in life and for democratic citizenship. As a citizen of the United States or any democracy, you have a duty to stay vigilant. You need to stay involved. You can't check out and sit on the couch and be depressed. You have to stay involved. I'm not saying you got to get all crazy or do anything crazy. That's not what I'm advocating. But you do have to stay involved in the process. If that means voting locally, voting for your school board, voting for the city council, then that's what you do. Do what you can do. What is the opposite of critical thinking? I'm being very opinionated in this video, so I apologize. The opposite of critical thinking is choosing what to do or say based entirely on emotion or jumping to a conclusion without facts. This type of lazy thinking is why propaganda is effective, i.e., people making assumptions based on sound bites, narratives, or believing what is said without questioning. I mean, some of this stuff that's coming out is ridiculous. It's comical. I don't know how you could not recognize it as propaganda if you're paying attention. I have high hopes that more people in the world are starting to see this type of communication for what it is. Propaganda in concert with technology has reached levels never seen in history. If we are to guard against ignorance and remain free, it is the responsibility of every American to be informed. Thomas Jefferson. During a societal collapse, you want to think critically to the best of your ability. However, deciding quickly is tricky because you need to make decisions on the fly. Survival choices based on emotion will not help you survive. The best suggestion I can make is to start reading books about war, famine, and hard times, and think about what you would do in those situations. Strive every day to change your perceptions and expand your horizons. One final note: critical thinking is about the right answer and not about feeling good about the answer. Critical thinking is about the right answer and not feeling good about the answer. So check out the books and videos below to immerse yourself in dystopia. These are just some societal collapse type books, good books that I like. I've got Amazon links on there. You can click over it or not, but even if you don't, regardless of the Amazon links, this is some pretty good stuff. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's World of Science Fiction. This came out before like Orwell's 1984. Of course, George Orwell's 1984 flagship book about dystopian society. How many fingers am I holding up? You know, that kind of stuff. Very, very good. I actually like, is it Roddy McDowall? I like the version with Roddy McDowall, the movie. If you don't want to watch, or if you don't want to read the book, it's good. Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand dystopian novel that includes politics, economics, and human philosophy. Some people like her, some people don't. I respect her. Federalist Papers, this is some heavy reading. This is Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay writing about three different branches of government: legislative, executive, and judiciary. It's basically a brain dump on how to think about and how to get the U.S. Constitution ratified by New York, get them to go along. What am I trying to say? It gives you the idea, the spirit of the law and the spirit of why we have a separation between the government, the legislative, executive, and judiciary branch. It's, like I said, it's dry, but it's worth reading. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, author, and Holocaust survivor who lost just about everyone in his family. He talks about the existential vacuum and the search for meaning. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Viktor Frankl. The Gulag Archipelago, a book by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. If you're interested in reading an excellent nonfiction book about societal collapse, check out the Gulag Archipelago. I first heard about this from Jordan Peterson, renowned Canadian psychologist. Solzhenitsyn, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. He spent 11 years in Soviet gulags. And it's basically him writing about his experience and human nature. Yeah. So you think you want socialism or communism in this country? Wow. Read the book, please, because you don't want that. So I wanted to say one other thing. Jordan B. Peterson, you should look him up. You can look him up on YouTube and watch some of his videos. Super sharp. Great ideas. He's a little out there, but I love the guy. I first listened to him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I've been a fan ever since. If you have boys or young men in your household and you want some positive food for thought on how to raise them, that is one good resource in addition to some of the other things that you might want to use. They Live. This is an old cult movie, John Carpenter movie. Gets right to the point. It's got some weird twists in it. Roddy Piper was in it. What's the famous line? I'm here to chew bubble gum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubble gum. It's that movie. If you haven't seen it, it's low budget, but it's excellent. So that's They Live. V for Vendetta. That's probably, I think that's my favorite post-apocalyptic movie. Outstanding. I think that should be I don't want to say required, but it's V for Vendetta is outstanding. The Australian actor Hugo Weaving plays the main character V in the movie, and it's based on a DC comic book. So I would check it out if I were you. Children of Men, that's another excellent dystopian movie based on a society where women are no longer fertile, and then there's all kinds of things going on in this like dystopian society, and then a woman. Well, I don't want to burn it for you. Children of Men, definitely worth watching. Okay, next section, know what you believe before without rule of law. What you believe affects how you react to a stressful or seemingly hopeless situation. The moral decisions you make are driven by your worldview and what you believe. They can be driven by your upbringing, a philosophy, a code of ethics, or a religion. It's important to figure out exactly what guides you in making choices, or you will have difficulty functioning or making life-saving choices. Ask yourself, what guides your decisions about moral issues? What are you willing to do to protect your own? Figure out your tipping points. Is it someone kicking in a door? Protecting someone who's being assaulted? Stopping thieves? Deal with these moral decisions before you find yourself in the midst of mass starvation or without the rule of law scenario brought on by collapse. Choosing others. Choosing friends and compatriots in a collapsed society is like walking a minefield. Everything you do will be risky, bartering, getting water, or protecting what you have. If you want a bird's eye view of what can happen in a collapse, read books about Maoist China or Stalin's Russia. These two leaders amassed a combined body count of over 1 million souls. They killed under these two leaders, 100 million souls were lost. And those two leaders, Stalin and Mao, they didn't do it by themselves, right? It's the population that drove most of that. The soldiers, the generals. We'll leave it at that. Normally, decent human beings won't act the same if they're starving, scared, or hopeless. Remember the triangle of needs. Pre-collapse, we are living at the pinnacle where all of our needs are met and more. And I think that's why there's a lot of issues with mental health and so many people are on medications and stuff. They have everything they need, and they're not being challenged. They're not getting enough exercise. They're not out in nature. They're not gardening. That's just my opinion. Remember the triangle of needs. Okay, societal collapse. We're at the pinnacle now, and we'll be at the base. Basic, food, water, shelter. What do you believe, and what are you willing to do? Get that straight before shit kicks off. Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people. John Adams. This is a video that you might want to check out. Jordan Peterson, 2017, existentialism via Solzhenitsyn. Interesting. Utopia, the idea of utopia versus human nature. I'm not smart enough to talk too much about what Jordan Peterson says, but if I understand correctly, one of the fundamentals is true communism, which is not true communism is supposed to be utopia, which I don't think anybody would be happy in a perfectly touchy-feely society where everybody's eating, everything looks the same, everybody's the same. You don't pay attention to equality of opportunity. Instead, you pay attention to equality of outcome. So this talks about the idea of utopia not taking into consideration human nature. Man. Whether you want to think man is an animal or not, he sure acts like one. So you basically can't have a communist utopia because man is man, and man will do what man will do. Propaganda and social collapse. Let's start by defining propaganda. In its simple form, propaganda is a lie or a half-truth. Keep in mind that those who study propaganda get really good at spotting it. So it's actually fun to pay attention. You can actually see, I'm going to show you down below, like the 17 types of propaganda. You'll see two or three different. You'll see them 2 or 3 times a day if you're watching any kind of news or reporting or listening to a politician talk. Constantly manipulating and lying. Okay, so use your critical thinking skills to notice what is going on around you, who's doing it, why are they doing it, does the message make sense, or is it just propping up a false narrative? Follow the money if you want to know who benefits from a certain narrative. Who owns this media company? Who owns this pharma corporation? Who owns this social media corporation? Or who is paying this social media corporation for advertising, so they have a vested interest? What country is paying X politician? These kinds of things are, I mean, just once you start looking at it and you start looking stuff up, it'll blow your mind. So follow the money and follow who is benefiting from the message that's being given to you. To identify a message as propaganda is to suggest something negative and dishonest. Synonyms for propaganda: lies, distortion, deceit, manipulation, mind control, psychological warfare, and brainwashing. Propaganda and persuasion: Garth S. Jowett, University of Houston, and Victoria O'Donnell, Montana State University. The road to self-reliance requires that you recognize propaganda, disinformation or half-truths used to manipulate individuals and groups towards a specific end goal. Buy it. These are the end goals. They want you to buy it. They want you to vote for it. They want you to use it. They want you to go for it. They want you to go against it. They want you to hate it. They want you to love it. They want you to do it. So you use the propaganda to drive people towards what you want the end goal to be. So down below I have 17 types of propaganda, but that being said, propaganda is evolving as we speak. But it will generally fall under one of these 17 categories. This is a powerful quote. A popular government without popular information or means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Okay, 17 types of propaganda that lead to destabilization of society. Testimonial, that's a celebrity endorsement of a product, politician, or movement. So dentist says this is 99 out of 100 dentists say, Crest toothpaste is the best. Or doctors say, Camel cigarettes are good for you. Bandwagon, everyone's doing it, you should too. And this is something I like to point out. If you're doing what 99% of the people are doing, you're probably wrong. Plain folks, the political candidate appears to be grassroots or all-American, which helps the little people identify with the candidate. I can't remember the politician. I think if she was in her house, she's drinking beer, get a beer out of her fridge, trying to act folksy. She lied about her race to get into, I think, Harvard. And she's got multiple houses. She's a multi-millionaire, and yet she wants to seem to the people that she wanted to vote for like she's, the average Joe, so she can identify with us. Transfer, using quotes and statements to support a cause that the person being quoted didn't intend. So a politician that wants to get a certain point across could take a quote from Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, anybody that was an orator or well-written. They could take that quote and they could twist it to fit their narrative, but that narrative is not what the original author intended. Fear, I'm going to talk about these next two together, fear and anger. These are the two things that are mainly used in this country to get you to buy drugs, to get you to vote, to get you to, you get the point. Fear and anger, fear and anger. This is what they use to get you to do what they want you to do, and it's what they use to get to split you up, to balkanize. I don't know who wants it, but somebody is trying to balkanize this country. What I mean by balkanize is split it up. Texas and Florida, East Coast, West Coast. I'm all for heated arguments. I'm all for objective discussions. I am not for the balkanization of my country. So, fear. This technique is prevalent among political parties and PACs, political action committees in the U.S. The idea is to present a dreaded circumstance and follow it with the behavior needed to avoid that horrible event. Insurance and pharma companies also use this tactic. So, if a guy's trying to sell you life insurance, he's going to go down the entire list of what's going to happen to your family if you die and you don't have life insurance. He's going to smack you over the head with the fear of what will happen to your family, and then he's going to hand you a carrot of you paying him for a life insurance policy. Anger, using hot button issues to manipulate. We all know what they are. So, things that make you angry, there's probably the top 10 out there. Shiny object, this has gotten to ridiculous proportions. Focusing on certain storylines. Here I'm talking about the mainstream media. I'm also talking about social media actually disbanding or doxing people that have a point of view that they don't like. So focusing on certain storylines to turn away from information that hurts the narrative, whatever that may be. So politician X is the next golden boy. He gets caught in a hotel, doing drugs and whatever else he's doing in there. They'll suppress that story and they'll put something else out there, whatever the flavor of the day is. Logical fallacies. The premise may be accurate, but the conclusion are not. So X, Y, Z is the premise. So that equals 1. But X, Y, Z does not equal 1. It equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. It's varied. It's not black and white. There's a lot of angles. There's various ways that you could look at it. So an oversimplification, again, to feed the narrative. Logical fallacies. So we just did that. Name calling. Name calling ties a person or a cause to a largely perceived negative image. So comparing our last president to Adolf Hitler. That's a good example, I would say. Or his followers to Nazis, which is ridiculous. Glittering generalities, closely related to what is happening in transverse above. Here, a generally accepted virtue is usually employed to stir up favorite emotions. The problem is that these words mean different things to different people and are often manipulated for the propagandist's use. And here's an example. The important thing to remember is that the propagandist uses these words positively. The important thing to remember is that the propagandist uses these words positively in this technique. They often include words like democracy, family values, when used positively, rights, civilization, even the word American. Gish galloping. You saw this in the last debates. A common tactic in debates is to throw off an opponent. So several false claims are fired rapid, like machine gun, and they're false. Falsely said, quickly said, and then the opponent doesn't give the opponent doesn't have the time to respond due to interference from other debaters or the person monitoring the debate. You see this used a lot in political debates now, to the point where it's ridiculous. Cherry picking. A selective presentation of fact to bolster a narrative includes deliberate obfuscation of facts. So deliberately like pushing things to the side or minimizing them that go against the narrative. Misleading the masses with half-baked truths, acting as if the only answer to the question is A or B when it is clearly not the only answer. Information overload. Sophisticated language is used to present an air of superiority, authority, and credibility beyond the audience's understanding. So I want to add to this fire hose. I don't know, this may be new, fire hose. So much information is coming at us, they can use it to their advantage. I don't know if that makes sense. Black and white fallacies. Presenting an issue. Okay, so this is 14. I'm talking about types of propaganda that can be used. Propaganda, lies, disinformation to push a certain narrative or to get you to do a certain act. So black and white fallacies, presenting an issue as if there are only two answers or possible outcomes. It's either this or that. There are other options, of course, often used to bolster a specific narrative. Euphemism. Number 15, using acceptable and politically correct terms to describe something that is anything but. So this is basically naming something fuzzy rabbit when it's actually a lion. That's a man-eating lion. So examples: collateral damage is used to denote innocents killed by a war activity, often in the thousands, using the term enhanced interrogation instead of torture. The Patriot Act, there's a good one. Notice that when they start naming bills and stuff and they're going up to be voted on, pay attention to what the name is. If it's a positive name, I guarantee it's the opposite of what the name of the bill is. So the Patriot Act is an act that removes the constitutional rights of the Fourth Amendment dealing with warrants, searches, and seizures. We sold ourselves down the river to feel safe. We gave up rights to feel safe. It's a snowball. Once the government takes rights away, they don't give them back. 16, dysphemism, the use of socially unacceptable or taboo terms in place of more pacifistic or politically correct terms. A person who is a patriot, and yeah, that's subjective, who a patriot is. The person who is a patriot could be labeled a terrorist, as an example. The word changes how people react to that person or their ideas. So linguistics is super important when it comes to propaganda. Third-party technique, supporting arguments from a neutral group or person that is not part of the conversation. There's an excellent article on propaganda. Why is everyone angry? Because that's the way they want it. Propaganda information provided by UtahTaxpayers.org. 17 propaganda peddlers. Who uses propaganda? I'll just go down the quick list. Politicians, advertisers, professional manipulators, social organizations, financial institutions, lobbyists, political think tanks, radio, TV, tech companies, pharma, nonprofits, foreign and domestic institutions, government, law enforcement, local politicians, all the way up the chain, and religious organizations. What happens if propaganda is left unchecked? The more rights we lose, the harder it will be to practice self-reliance. I can't stress enough how deep control will go once democratic rights are extinguished. It's a slippery slope. Unchecked, this trend of propaganda and disinformation threatens at worst to subvert the very foundation of our democratic society. Propaganda and Persuasion by Garth S. Jowett, University of Houston, and Victoria O'Donnell, Montana State University. A nation of well-informed men. I don't mean to be. He didn't mean to be sexist. That's how they said it now, men or women. A nation of well-informed men and women who have been taught to know and prize rights which God has given them cannot be enslaved. It is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins. And finally, there's a video that you can watch. Hyson Lee. She escaped from South Korea. She grew up there. You think you want to live in a communist country? Take a look at that video. Okay, guys. Appreciate you watching. See you next time. Scott with Ready Squirrel. Ready